So, what if the biggest drug story of the decade wasn't really about weight loss at all? Today, we're diving into how Novo Nordisk is totally transforming its blockbuster medicine and, at the same time, unleashing a successor that could completely change how we think about chronic disease. Yeah, you've seen the headlines about Ozempic. Of course you have. But while the whole world was focused on weight loss, this drug was quietly starting a revolution, learning how to protect our hearts and our kidneys. And believe me, that's only half the story. And we're going to break down this two-part revolution. First, we'll look at how the drug we all know is evolving into, well, a bodyguard for our most vital organs. And then, we'll get into how its successor is already showing up with even more firepower, ready to rewrite the rules all over again. Okay, let's start with the reigning champion. How on earth did a drug that was famous for managing blood sugar suddenly become a frontline defense for the heart and kidneys? So, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, the magic ingredient we're talking about is semaglutide. For years, this has been the engine inside Ozempic and Wegovy, and it was pretty much all about diabetes and weight loss. But now, the entire script is being flipped. The focus is shifting, and it's shifting dramatically, from what this drug removes, like pounds or high blood sugar, to what it can now actively protect. And this is really where the story pivots. We're moving away from just managing a condition to actively trying to prevent a catastrophe. This is brand new territory. You know, the speed of this change is just staggering. I mean, look at this. In just a few months, regulators in both the US and Europe gave the green light for a whole cascade of new uses. It kicked off in January when the FDA approved it for kidney disease protection. Then, boom, promising data for artery disease. Then, Europe's regulators jumped in for heart and stroke benefits. This wasn't a slow walk, this was an absolute blitz. So here's the big takeaway. Semaglutide has officially graduated. It's not just a metabolic drug anymore. It's what doctors call a cardiorenal protective therapy. That's a fancy way of saying it's now officially approved to shield your heart and kidneys from damage, actively cutting the risk of things like heart attacks and strokes. This is a huge expansion of its job description. But here's the really incredible part of the story. Just as semaglutide is cementing this incredible new legacy, Novo Nordisk is already pulling back the curtain on its successor. The next generation is already walking out onto the stage. So let's meet the heir apparent, Amycretin. This is the drug that Novo Nordisk is betting the future on, and while the early signs are suggesting it's playing in a whole different league. So what's the difference under the hood? Well, it boils down to this. Semaglutide is what's called a GLP-1 agonist. Think of it like a key that fits one specific lock in your body. It mimics one gut hormone to help control your appetite and insulin. Amycretin, though, is a dual agonist. It's like a master key that unlocks two different doors at the same time, targeting GLP-1 and another hormone called amylin. The whole idea? A much more powerful 1-2 punch effect. And what does that more powerful effect actually look like in the real world? It looks like this, 17.1%. That is the average weight loss people saw in just 20 weeks. Now, to put that into perspective for you, it took the original semaglutide trials over a year to get to similar numbers. Results like that don't just raise eyebrows in the medical world, they send shockwaves through medicine and finance. So the promise of Ozempic is pretty clear, right? You've got these stunningly fast results, the convenience of it being developed as both a pill and an injection, and a safety profile that looks pretty familiar. That combo is exactly why it's now getting fast-tracked into those huge late-stage phase 3 trials. But look, with this much excitement, and with millions of people potentially taking this drug, intense scrutiny isn't just expected, it is absolutely essential. And that brings us to the critical role of the regulators. Because whenever a class of drugs becomes this successful, a really important question comes up. As we learn more about all the incredible benefits, what are we learning about potential super rare risks when you give it to millions and millions of people? And we saw this exact process happen in 2025. The European Medicines Agency, which is kind of like Europe's version of the FDA, had its safety committee, the PRAC, launch a review. They were looking into some reports of a potential and very rare risk of a specific issue with the optic nerve. This is totally standard procedure, and by June, they had wrapped up their initial review as part of their normal ongoing monitoring. And it is so important to understand what this means. This kind of safety check isn't some big red flag. It's actually the system working perfectly. For any medicine that's used by millions of people, this continuous monitoring is exactly how we make sure the benefits always outweigh any potential risks. So, when you zoom out and look at the big picture, this two-pronged strategy becomes crystal clear. On one hand, you maximize the champion you already have, turning semaglutide into a protective shield for our most vital organs. And on the other hand, you launch the next generation, pushing Amycretin forward to set a completely new bar for what's even possible. And this leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. We are literally watching a shift from just managing symptoms to proactively defending our bodies against some of the deadliest chronic diseases out there. As these tools become more and more common, how are they going to completely redefine what it even means to be healthy 10 years from now?